Well, Tonita, thank you so much for joining us on the Formidable podcast. We're thrilled to have you here today.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the conversation. So, I thought maybe we could just start out a little bit. You've been in the credit union world for a very long time, and have a lot of experience there, at a variety of different organizations. Give us a little sort of state of credit unions. How are things going? What's business like? Where are the major challenges and opportunities for credit unions right now?
Yeah, credit unions, I think, like most organizations, whether it's banking or not, we're all still trying to recover from the pandemic, right? So we had this situation where within the pandemic, we were giving PPP loans, or the government was giving PPP loans. They were also giving families incentives and money, and folks had deposits, right? They had a lot of deposits. Then insert inflation. People were spending more money, not bringing in the deposits they were in those first few years of the pandemic. And I think credit unions and banks, we were running short on money to lend out. So we had to wait until things leveled out. Then there was one other thing that happened in the pandemic. Even people who had no desire to use technology discovered, well, wait, this saves me time, right? And so there became even more expectations on technology. And while credit unions, not that we didn't update technology, we tend to be a little slower than others, right? And so then if we didn't know before, the pandemic just kind of, it hit us in the face that we got to update our technology, because now I think across generations people are addicted to the fast way of doing things.
I can absolutely see why that would be a challenge, especially in a small organization where you might not have access to the kind of capital necessary to make those investments.
Exactly.
I also know that, you know, diverse representation in the banking industry has been hard to come by, for a long time, and that's been a priority of yours. Talk a little bit about the efforts that you've made in that arena, and kind of what you'd like to see change.
Yeah, I think we're making progress, right? There are definitely more women, more BIPOC women that are CEOs in the banking industry and across other industries too. I I think what the world realized, and there's some opposition to this, right? Is yes, we may have made it legal or change the rules to allow women to hold positions, but we didn't put any intentionality around hiring the women, right? Or hiring BIPOC folks. I mean, in my lifetime, I'm not going to age you, I'll age myself. In my lifetime, there were women who couldn't get their own loan, right? We just, I think it was 1974, women were able to get their own loan. They had to have a husband or a dad to get the loan. That is within a lot of people's lifetime. So now we're talking about making room for them to lead organizations. To make that swing, you have to be intentional about it. And for us at Verity, what that intentionality means, representing our community. Seattle has many diverse communities, and I want to be able to represent the community we serve.
Talk about that from a practical standpoint, Tanita. So, what does that mean, and how does that translate to the operations?
Yeah, so when folks come in, let's start at the just the basic level. when members come in or community members come in and they want a credit union, they see people who look like them. And that's really important, especially with our history in banking, where BIPOC folks or other traditionally underserved, financially underserved communities were just left out of the conversation, and rules and practices were created that didn't allow them to participate. So there's some fear there, right? There's some, they feel like there's going to be automatic bias. That's at the simplest form. Um, Internally, right? If you have a diverse organization, you are speaking to people's lived experiences, right? And while no community is a monolith, there are some things that folks understand and know that may be holding their community back. And they can say, hey, that's not going to work in my community because here is some of the things we've dealt with in the past. Without that insight, without that information, you don't build an organization that represents your community and delivers their needs.
That's such an interesting point. And I love what you're saying too about the if they don't feel like they when they walk in the door there are people who look like them or are going to understand their community, that can be very off-putting. I know you've done a lot to diversify your board too, probably for the same reasons. What I mean, that's a hard thing to do. Everybody's trying to diversify their boards. What suggestions do you have for how you've been able to do that and do so thoughtfully?
Yeah, so I can't take credit for that. My board made that decision before I came aboard, right? And they looked at just not gender diversification or diversification. They also looked at age, right? And so in the credit union board, it's typical that it's retirees or older individuals, which is not a bad thing. I think one of anything is not a good thing. So the board decided to recruit young professionals to add to some of the tenure, and they looked at the communities within Seattle and wanted a representation of that. And they found professionals who represented the many communities that we have.
Amazing. They were actually able to find professionals in the communities. That's what you always hear, right? Is
Yeah.
we can't find them. We can't
Oh,
find
yeah.
them.
Which I'm going to tell you, that's not true.
I love that. No, that's really helpful. When you start to see this kind of better representation, so what the change that you've been able to make at Verity, the work that you've been able to do there, maybe the work that you were able to do at your previous organization, what happens as a result? What do you see as outcomes of a shift in diverse leadership?
For one, you get more ideas, right? There are more ideas at the table. There are more, when there comes more ideas, there are more solutions that come to the table, and solutions that impact communities in a way that serve them best. Also, when you're open to diversification within your organization, that promotes collaboration, and then that translates outside of the organization. So now we're collaborating with community members, right? We're co-creating, not going into communities and saying, well, this is what we can do for you, take it or leave it, but rather going into communities and saying, how can we contribute? How can we partner together? We're not here to be your saviors. We're here to partner with you.
Are there any examples, Tonita, of some places where you've seen just having people who understand maybe a community better were able to navigate a trickier situation or some pushback that maybe that community had against banking in a traditional sense, or I don't know, any kind of examples that you could share?
Yeah, the Othello project. That was definitely community based and driven. They wanted credit unions in that space. They wanted what the community wanted, not us coming in telling them what we could do. And so that allowed us to create products that represent the community. There's a large Muslim population in the community. These are folks who did not want to be pushed out, right? So we partner with them to come up with a solution so they can have home ownership and remain in this wonderful, diverse, beautiful community.
I love that. That's a great example. Thank you. Um, so does that tie to this concept that I know Verity kind of stands for? I believe it's socially responsible and community rooted banking. What does that mean? And maybe talk a little bit about how that is in practice.
Yeah, I think it starts with the partnership with the community, understanding the needs, listening, right? Not being the big bad banker that comes in, right? It starts there. Socially responsible, we got to care about the issues that the community cares about, right? And there's a third part of that, and that is environment. What are we doing to help the issues in the environment, right? So we can offer um, hybrid loans or electric cars, and that's great, and we're contributing. But I think we need to go deeper. You remember when it was I think a couple years ago or 3 years ago when it was 100 and something degrees in Seattle, right? Who do you think suffers, right? Is the traditionally financially underserved, because Seattle is not a place where there's a lot of AC, right, in homes. And if someone is traditionally underserved, chances are they don't have money to go to a hotel like many Seattleites did. So, how are we lending responsibly that impacts financial low to moderate income folks in a responsible way? Are we helping with um, window replacements, AC, other things? So it's just not, oh, we offer electric car loans or hybrid loans, but it goes deeper to the needs. How do we reduce the electric bills? How do we um, insulate homes?
It sounds like you're thinking about that sort of holistically.
Yes, yes, for sure.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. So, as I'm sure you are following, there's been a lot of pushback against, lending to particular communities or even focusing on particular communities that are maybe underserved. And there's even a lawsuit, that's aimed at taking this issue to the Supreme Court.
Mhm.
What do you think about this pushback? Where do you think it's coming from, and what are you doing? Maybe this is a two-part question, I guess. What are you doing as you think about that from a leadership perspective at Verity?
Yeah, I have a lot. I think about a lot regarding this pushback, but it's simple to me, right? What is proven? What is fact? We have had federal policy regulations that prevented certain communities from being able to own homes. I mean, even to having a will. I mean, all of these things that white communities were able to have, but other communities were not. Um, with that being said, it was that way for so long that all of those communities fell behind. So the wealth gap is wide, and it gets wider as we don't fix some of the systemic issues that are in place. That's That's just fact. That's not something someone made up. You can go to the federal records. It's there. Um, I think people are pushing back because they have in their mind, because that's how these regulations were created, they have in their mind they're going to lose something. And the data says if we um, close the gap, the wealth gap, we'll add 6 to 8% to the GDP. Everyone benefits when you do that. You have more people participating in the market. You have more people home ownership. Um, if you look at that, if we got more people owning homes, more people are paying taxes. So programs are funded. I mean, at the very least, this is easy peasy stuff. Um, you all benefit. No one is going to lose anything because we allow um, other folks that we traditionally shut out to participate in the market.
So you think it comes out of a fear that essentially this is pie and it can only be divided up so many different ways?
Absolutely. I mean, if you go back to this country and how it started, it was really about capitalism, right? And who has power. It really wasn't about race. It was about power. And it continues to be about power.
So is there anything that you can do? You guys are a financial institution. You are, trying to assist with the closing of the wealth gap. And I know that that's a passion of yours. And you're in a position to do something about it, which makes you relatively unique in that regard. How are you applying that within Verity, and how are you protecting Verity from, a situation where something like the Fearless Fund lawsuit is successful?
Right. So we don't do anything differently than we do for everyone else. We just expand our reach, right? And we take into consideration the systemic issues that have held people back, right? And so we are within regulation, but we understand that we can look at it differently and that we can lend to more people. And we have technology now. We're using AI that goes and grabs other things beside a credit score to see whether someone is going to pay a loan back. We're checking. We're within regulation, but it doesn't have to be in the traditional ways because we know the traditional ways were set up to limit the number of people who can participate. We are CDFI, so we have grants that are um, used for intention of closing that wealth gap. And so we use grants. If someone wants to argue with the government, we got the grant from the government, right? So we're going to use it for what is intended. And if you're a CDFI, your target market has to be low to moderate income folks.
Talk a little bit about that. So, what does that look like on the output side?
Um, what do you mean by output?
So, like, you're targeting the CDFI grants.
Yeah,
Talk a little bit about what that is and why that exists.
sure. So CDFI exists because it was a way to correct the past errors, right? To oversimplify it. And they look at issues that keeps that gap widening and then provides loans to folks who are intentionally lending to those communities more capital, if you will, to be able to lend out. So, as an example, we have a small dollar loan gap that is a good use for helping people who get wrapped up in payday lending, right? Or overdraft. Another thing that we did was we reduced and almost took is very minimum overdraft fees, right? So we don't have the big fees, we cut it off. Members can't just go negative from month to month. And some people are heavy users. So the small dollar loan will allow us to say, okay, how else can we help this member so they can be in the position to gain wealth?
I want to drill down on that just a
Mhm.
little bit because that's such an. I know that you have spent a lot of time studying that, Tanita, and I know it was the subject of your PhD, was it not?
Yes, it
Yeah.
was. Uh-huh.
So let's talk a little bit about that. What were you studying, and where did you focus your energies in that study?
Yeah, so I was studying the wealth gap and credit union strategies that could help reduce the gap. My focus was um history. How did we get here, right? And so I studied a lot of history, which took me back to laws and programs that were created that limited low to moderate income or to financially folks who are financially underserved, right? So I walked us through, this is how we got here, this is the impact of describing the wealth gap, and then I studied three credit unions where their focus was low to moderate income folks and the strategies that they use. And what I discovered is they just took it back to how credit unions were started. We were created to help the low to moderate income, and they didn't, while regulation and laws sometimes create an obstacle for you, these credit unions were creative in getting, not getting around, but overcome that obstacle so that they could serve communities. And these were successful credit unions who also made money. And in the credit union world, if we make money, that's more we can give back to community and to our members.
Best part of credit unions, if you ask me.
Exactly. Exactly.
Every time my husband has some sort of banking fee on his, it's like, yeah,
Yep.
I get paid to have an account.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So, I I think it's really interesting. You said you looked at the history,
Mhm.
and sort of the why
Mhm.
behind this all, and there's a part of me that feels like, you spoke to it earlier that part of the pushback comes from a lack of understanding of that.
Mhm.
Can you speak to that a little bit, Tonita, about what you discovered when you were doing your studies and what some of the major historical challenges were for these
Yeah.
communities?
Yeah, I think if we just start with grabbing my water, sorry. um, if we start with just let's the New Deal. Let's just start there because that is it within some folks' lifetime. So not my lifetime. I'm going to say that, but within some people's lifetime, and this was supposed to be a program, a plan that created wealth for people, right? If you read the New Deal, there were covenants that did not include Black families or BIPOC families. Um, Black soldiers went out and fought the war just like everyone else, but the GI Bill wasn't available for them like white people. So, what did that do? That didn't allow them to build wealth, didn't allow them to participate in the economy like others. That is clear. We know that. That's fact, right? There's data to support that. That also created what we call redlining, which pushed primarily BIPOC communities within a certain section that sometimes they couldn't be insured, mortgages weren't given in those areas, or if they were, it was at a higher interest rate than other areas. It also allowed for communities to determine whether they wanted BIPOC folks in their communities or not. So all of these things created a barrier for BIPOC people to be. It was impossible for them to overcome, and it created this wide gap. So let's talk about the Great Recession, the mortgage crisis. What was discovered with those loans, it was mostly BIPOC folks who were getting those shady loans, not by their choice. That was the only opportunity they had to home ownership. And most of them lost their homes during the crisis, and it widened the gap worse than what it was in the 60s. We lost whatever we gained.
Wow. I've never heard it put that way, but it makes perfect sense. So that community is still trying to build that back, essentially.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, what would you like to see? So, in your position, obviously, you can control the policies and procedures at your institution, but what would you like to see maybe in the wider banking community to sort of right some of these wrongs?
Yeah, first, let's change the narrative. No one's looking for a handout. Folks are asking for a level playing field. Now, with that level playing field, we got to make up for the wrong that we've done. And I think that is the narrative some people are spinning, that people just want a handout. No, they don't. This country, with some of our laws, our regulation, have created harm for communities. And we need to make up for that and then level the playing field so people can contribute to generational wealth and home ownership and all the things that others enjoy freely.
Absolutely. It's such an important point. The narrative is absolutely key there.
Mhm.
Well, before I let you go, I want to talk a little bit about you.
Sure.
So you were pursuing a PhD at the same time as being the CEO of a credit union.
Mhm.
First of all, I want to know a little bit more about your time management skills because they are clearly excellent.
um, that's debatable. I think I I grew up in the South, right? And so, be it right or wrong, I was taught that I had to do more than anybody else, right? You have to show up early, you have to stay later, you have to be the most educated. And I think that has stayed with me, even though I've tried to work through it. That stayed with me, even when I didn't realize that's exactly what was driving me. And I think that was driving me a little bit when I decided to go for my PhD. And so with that, my mindset is I don't have a choice, right? I have to do this. And I don't know that I manage my time well. I think my family understood what I was trying to do. And so my husband and my kids helped me through this process. The other thing, my other reason for getting a PhD is I've been doing this stuff, like working my whole life. When I retire, I need something to do. I don't want to be in the way. I want the younger generation to be able to take my position and, carry it forward. But then what am I going to do when I get home? So all of those things were in my mind. So I committed to doing it, and I had a good dissertation chair. I had a lot of people who were helping me. My daughter, she was my proofreader. Everyone contributed to my success.
I love that. It's good work for your daughter too, I'm sure.
Yes.
Learned a few things. So when you say when you step away from being a CEO, you
Mhm.
want to know what's next. Is it teaching? Is that kind of what you have in mind?
I do have that in mind. That's something I can do when I want to do it, and not too much enough for me not to drive my husband crazy. Um, and, and fill that void I have to work.
Love that. I've taught before, and it's such a oh, it's so much fun. You know,
Mhm.
you get the youthful energy from the class, and yeah, it's really fun. Was there anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to dive into a little bit more?
No, I think you went pretty deep with all my my passions and even my craziness around getting additional education. I am finished though. I'm done. I'm not going to be one of these folks with 2 and 3 PhDs. I am well. I am good.
I think one PhD is impressive enough.
I think so too.
Well, it's been so much fun talking to you today, Sunita. Thank you for taking the time and just really appreciate the discussion and your openness.
Thank you. I appreciate talking to you. It's always fun talking to you. So